Hi everybody, Jim Sammons here from the Kayak Fishing Show. Some of the more common questions I tend to get, particularly when it comes to offshore fishing, big game fishing, is what size gear do you need? How heavy of line do you need when you're going after some of these bigger fish? Now, it really comes down to the area that you're fishing. For instance, if I'm fishing open water for yellowtail, I can get away with 20-pound test and not really have to worry about it. I'm going to land anything I want to. Then again, if those fish are near structure, particularly near the kelp beds, then I'm going to have to bump up that line because I need the abrasion resistance and the cutting ability of heavier line. So the main thing is having the right line based on the fish that you're targeting and the bait sizes that you're using. If you're using really small baits, if you've got really heavy line, that live bait's not going to swim quite as well. When it comes down to the size of the gear, I've always said, you don't need big gear in a kayak. I see guys going after big game with enormous gear, and in my opinion, it's just really much more cumbersome than it needs to be. We've caught many marlin on reels as small as this Siegler SGN. That's the small game narrow. What you always have to remember when you're kayak fishing is that the kayak itself is drag. You're really never putting as much pressure on that fish as you think you are. So this can work for you in a couple of different ways. Because the kayak itself is drag, you actually have the ability to light tackle fish. So you can go for some of these really large fish. For me here in San Diego, that would be yellowtail, white sea bass, thresher sharks. I've caught many of these fish on line as low as 6-pound test when I know they're out away from the kelp. My largest line to fish ratio was I got a 67-pound thresher shark on 6-pound test. And that is simply because the kayak, again, is drag. One way I try to explain it to people is you want to really see how hard you can pull on a kayak. Snag 20-pound monofilament on the bottom or in the rocks. It's really hard to break because you're pulling so much of your energy gets absorbed by the rod and then the movement of the kayak. Again, you're not really putting as much pressure on it as you think you are. So you can fish with really light line if you want to go that route. You can also fish heavier line and fish really tight drags. So what I always say is I'm already giving the fish my kayak, so why give him line too? So I tend to fish a really tight drag and then I'll pump up that line weight to a little bit heavier so I can really lean on it and not have to worry about it breaking me off, because I know the boat's going to go maybe a little bit softer tipped rod, so any kind of head shakes, you get that absorption on the softer tipped rod, but then just fish a really tight drag and just go. You don't need that heavy line. So gear it towards what the fish is, whether you need abrasion resistance, anything like that, and then fish the gear that you're comfortable with. For instance, this is an SGN. I've got this loaded with 60-pound hollow core braid, and the reason I've got it loaded with 60-pound is because I know that a fish isn't going to get that much line from me anyway. So I can put 60-pound test on there. I don't have to have as many yards of line on the reel itself. And then of course doing a wind-on leader top shot, and my wind-ons are usually like 20 feet long. And then I can put that, I can do a 20-pound test wind-on. I can do a 100-pound test wind-on if I'm going for marlin or that sort of thing that have the abrasion, the very abrasive bills. So you have to kind of play with it, but just realize again, in the kayak itself is drag. Hook into a bass this big and that bass will pull your kayak. So you can imagine what it's like when you get into a really, really big fish. That kayak can really get moving. So since the kayak is moving, you're not really giving that fish line. Button down that drag, hold on tight, let him take you for a ride. And he's not going to get that much line on you. You're just going to wear him out by letting him pull on it. So again, the kayak is drag. You're never pulling on the fish as hard as you think you are. So think about that when you're picking out the line setup and the reel setups that you're going to use. I guarantee you, you hook into a big fish on this little reel, you're still going to land it because it's a good quality reel with very smooth drags, and that's one of the keys. The best thing you can do is always use good quality reels like the ones I use from Siegler Reels, and make sure they're loaded up with the best line you can get from Seaguar. I hope you enjoyed this quick little video. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you haven't done so already, I hope you'll subscribe to Kayak Fishing Tales. Remember, please always wear your PFD, and I look forward to seeing you on the water.